Welcome back. This is part 3 of International Human Rights Law. In this part, we are going into the transition from national to international human rights protection. In this transition, one of those famous people, those towering figures who are part of the who is who of international law, played a central role. The background of human rights becoming part of international law are the years leading up to World War II. What happened then under fascist regimes in Germany and elsewhere demonstrated what modern states are capable of when their totalitarian potential is unleashed. The consequences were genocide and war. The war sparked the creation of a post-war world order with the United Nations at its center. But at the same time, also elements of international human rights law were introduced as part of the new world order. And in fact, the United Nations and international human rights protection are closely interrelated. You can see it in Article 1, paragraph 3, that states that among the purposes of the United Nations is to achieve international cooperation in solving international problems of an economic, social, cultural, or humanitarian character, and in promoting and encouraging respect for human rights and for fundamental freedoms for all without distinction as to race, sex, language, or religion. So what we have here is an express reference to human rights in the United Nations Charter. Building on this, Eleanor Roosevelt took over her function. Eleanor Roosevelt was the widow of US President Franklin D. Roosevelt, FDR, who died in office in April 1945. FDR's successor, Harry Truman, finished the job of establishing the United Nations, and as soon as the organization was created, work on an international human rights document was started. An international commission with experts from all over the world was put into place, and it was Harry Truman who mandated Eleanor Roosevelt to act as the chair of that commission. This was the commission that, under the lead of Eleanor Roosevelt, drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The declaration was finally adopted by the General Assembly of the United Nations on the 10th of December 1948. Let's have a closer look at the nature of that document. And we can find some hints to the nature of that document here in that part of the preamble. What do you think? What kind of document could that be? Is that a treaty, an international agreement, or is it something else? What do you think? What's your best guess? Well, we can find the answer in the wording of the preamble. The preamble calls the declaration a common standard of achievement, and it says that every individual and every organ of society shall strive by teaching and education to promote respect for these rights and freedoms, and by progressive measures, national and international, to secure their universal and effective recognition and observance. Well, as you can see here, this is not meant as legally binding. This is not meant as creating legal obligations for states. It's just a common standard of achievement. It's something to strive at. So it's not a treaty. There is no legal obligation. And of course, this nature of the declaration as simply a declaration and not a treaty made it easier to adopt it in the General Assembly. And even without being a treaty, without being legally binding, the Universal Declaration of Human Rights became an immensely influential document. It influences national constitutions, national bills of rights, and it also influences treaty making in the field of international human rights protection. So it is without hesitation that we can add it to the picture, the overall picture we have on the blackboard. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is very much the starting point of a new phase in the history of human rights, in the whole development of human rights law. It is the starting point of international human rights law. Eleanor Roosevelt was well aware of this when she gave her opening statement in the United Nations General Assembly on the 10th of December 1948. It's worth watching and listening to what she says in that 1-minute recording. You find it on YouTube. It gives you a sense of the whole optimism, the whole euphoria that marked the beginning of that new chapter in the history of human rights. As soon as you have heard Eleanor Roosevelt's statement, you're ready to go into the next part, part 4.